Alright, welcome back to Section 4, Neritic Zone and Open Ocean. Today we're going to talk about what are the conditions in the Neritic Zone, what environments support coral reefs and kelp forests, and what are the conditions in the open ocean. Floating mats of algae on the ocean surface mark the location of a kelp forest. Bright orange sheephead fish dart about. Young sea lions chase each other around the kelp stalks as sea otter dives down to the rocky ocean bottom. When it rises, the otter is clutching a sea urchin between its paws. On the surface again, the otter rolls on its back among the kelp. The otter skillfully uses his paws to scoop out the meat from the soft parts of the sea urchin. Okay, organisms in the Neritic Zone. Because it is so rich in nutrients, the Neritic Zone supports a huge variety of organisms. These include sea lions and herring. Conditions in the Neritic Zone. A kelp forest is one type of habitat found in the Neritic Zone. Remember that the Neritic Zone extends from the low tide line out to the edge of the continental shelf. A huge variety of organisms are found in the Neritic Zone. More than in any other zone, most of the world's major fishing grounds are found in the zone. Why is the Neritic Zone home to so many living things? The answer has to do with the location over the continental shelf. The shallow water over the continental shelf receives sunlight and steady supply of nutrients washed from the land into the ocean. The light and nutrients enable large plant-like algae to grow. This algae serves as food sources and shelter for other organisms. In many parts of the Neritic Zone, upwelling currents bring additional nutrients from the bottom of the surface. These nutrients support large numbers of plankton, which form the base of the ocean food webs. Schools of fish such as sardines and herrings feed on the plankton. Major fisheries in upwelling areas include Monterey Canyon off the California coast, Newfoundland's Grand Banks, and George Bank off the New England coast. Coral reefs. A coral reef is another type of diverse habitat found in the Neritic Zone. Although a coral reef may look as if it is made of rock, it is actually made of living things. Coral reefs are created by colonies of tiny coral animals, each of which is not much larger than a pencil eraser. Each coral animal produces a hard structure that surrounds its soft bodies. After the coral dies, the empty structure remains. New coral animals attach and grow on top of it. Over many years, a reef is built. Okay, an atoll. An atoll develops in stages, beginning with the fringing reef that surround a volcanic island. So you have a volcanic island, and then you have the fringing reef, and that's what causes an atoll to form. Okay, a fringe closely surrounds the island. So you have the volcanic island, the lagoon inside here, and the barrier reef. As the island sinks, a lagoon forms inside this barrier reef, and that's what is called an atoll. And finally, the island sinks, leaving a ring-shaped atoll. Okay? Environment of coral reefs. Microscopic algae live in the bodies of the coral animals and provide food for the corals. The algae need warm temperatures and sunlight. Therefore, coral reefs can form only in shallow tropical ocean waters. The reefs grow above continental shelf or around volcanic islands where the water is shallow. Ring-shaped reefs. In areas where the seafloor is sinking, a reef may develop over time into an atoll. An atoll is a ring-shaped reef around a shallow lagoon. Figure 13, which we've already talked about, shows the development of an atoll. It begins as a fringing reef that closely surrounds the edges of the island. As the seafloor sinks, the island sinks with it, and the reef continues to grow upward. Water separates the top of the barrier reef from the island. The island continues to sink until it is entirely underwater, forming the atoll. Anyway, life around a reef. Coral can form a variety of shapes. These shapes are suggested by the names of coral species: elkhorn, brain, plate, star. Many animals live in and around a coral reef. Coral reef animals include octopus, Spiny lobster, shrimp, and fish are in all colors and sizes. Parrotfish scrape coral off the reef to eat. The parrotfish grind up the broken coral inside their bodies and produce the fine, soft sand commonly found around the reef. Okay. Coral reefs and humans. Coral reefs are like natural aquarium exhibit, displays of colorful diversity of life that people can enjoy and study. Reefs also protect coastlines during violent storms. The reefs break up the surf, preventing waves from severely eroding the land. However, human activities can harm the fragile reefs. Boat anchors dragging across the reef can damage it. Divers can accidentally break off pieces of the reef. Even brushing against the reef can harm coral animals. Because coral grows only a few millimeters a year, a reef cannot quickly recover. Changes in water temperature and clearness also affect algae. Therefore, endanger coral reefs. For example, if the water becomes too warm, the corals release the algae that live inside them. Cloudy water endangers the algae by reducing the amount of light that reaches them. If sediments produced by storms or human activities bury a reef, the algae in the living coral cannot survive. Without the algae, the coral animals die. Today, many people understand the importance of coral reefs and try to protect them. Many reef areas have been set aside as marine sanctuaries. In a marine sanctuary, the amount of diving and other activities near the reef is limited. Scientists are also studying the effects of temperature change and pollution on the reefs in order to preserve them. Okay, life in a kelp forest. Below the water surface, stalks of giant kelp gently sway back and forth. Sunlight filters through the water, producing a greenish light. If you could examine one of the kelps standing close up, you would notice small bulbs at the base of the frond. The bulbs keep the heavy kelp fronds upright in water. Environment of kelp forests. Conditions that favor kelp forests exist along the Pacific coast from Alaska to Mexico. Kelp forests grow in cold, neritic waters where the ocean has a rocky floor. Kelp are large, heavy algae and they require a solid rocky bottom to anchor their stalks. A bundle of root-like strands called a holdfast attach the algae to the rock. A stalk of giant kelp can grow to 30 meters in length. The air bladders keep the heavy stalk upright in the water, providing a habitat. The kelp uses the sunlight and dissolved gases in the neritic zone to produce their own food. The kelp also provides a habitat for many other organisms. The cartons of kelp hide young gray whales from predators while their mothers are feeding. Sea slugs and snails live amid the tangle of the holdfasts. Sea otters play a particularly important role in a kelp forest. In addition to eating abalone, sea otters feed on sea urchins, which eat the kelp. In areas where sea otters have disappeared, armies of sea urchins have devoured the kelp. The once thriving forest has become a barren, rocky zone. Okay, conditions in the open ocean. The open ocean begins where the neritic zone ends at the edge of the continental shelf. The open ocean differs from the neritic zone in two important ways. First, only a small part of the open ocean receives sunlight. Second, the water has fewer nutrients. As a result, the open ocean supports fewer organisms. Diving into the open ocean is like walking down a long staircase that has light only at the top. Sunlight penetrates only a short distance into the water. If the water is cloudy, sunlight does not reach as far. In clear tropical waters, however, sunlight may be able to reach as deep as a few hundred meters. Recall the neritic zone receives a constant supply of nutrients from the shore. In contrast, dissolved nutrients are less abundant in the open ocean. The surf zone. You have read that the water column in the open ocean can be divided into three zones. The surface zone extends as far as the sunlight can reach below the surface. The surface zone is the only part of the open ocean that receives enough sunlight to support the growth of algae. The microscopic algae are the base of the open ocean food webs. Animal plankton that feed on the algae include shrimp-like krill, as well as the young of crabs, mollusks, and fishes. The transition zone. The transition zone ends the bottom of the surface zone to a depth of about 1 kilometer. The water here is dark and colder than in the surface zone. The deep zone. The water is even darker and colder than in the transition zone. Because of its harsh conditions, the deep ocean is often compared to a desert. Few organisms live in the deep zone compared to the other ocean and land environments. But unlike a desert, which bakes under the bright sun, the deep ocean is cold, dark, and wet. Finding food in the darkness is a challenge. Many deep sea fishes produce their own light. The production of light by living things is called bioluminescence. Chemical reactions in the cells of organisms produce bioluminescence. In some cases, light is produced by bioluminescent bacteria that live on the body of fishes. In other cases, the chemical reaction takes place in the bodies of the fishes, as they do in fireflies on land. For example, tiny light-producing structures are scattered over the surfaces of some fish. Other fish, such as anglerfish, have a light-producing organs. The anglerfish has a light organ on its head. The anglerfish lurks in the shadows below the pool of light created by its light organ. Shrimp and fish that are attracted to light become prey under the anglerfish. The food supply in most of the deep ocean is much more limited than in the shallow water. Therefore, animals in this zone must be good hunters to survive. The gaping mouths of many deep sea fish are filled with the fang-like teeth. Rows of sharp teeth stick out at angles, ensuring that any animal it bites cannot escape. Hydrothermal vents. In the deep zone, food is very scarce. As a result, organisms there tend to be small and slow-moving. However, there is one kind of deep zone environment, a hydrothermal vent, that supports organisms of an unusual number, variety, and size. At a hydrothermal vent, hot water rises out of the cracks in the ocean floor. This rising water has been heated by hot rock magma beneath the ocean floor. These vents are located along the ocean ridges where the plates are moving apart and new ocean floor is forming. A hydrothermal vent is far from sunlight. What could organisms around a hydrothermal vent find to eat? The heated water coming from a vent carries gas and minerals from Earth's interior. Bacteria feed directly on the chemical nutrients, like the algae in the surface zone, that use sunlight to produce food. These bacteria use chemical nutrients to produce food. The bacteria form the base of the food web at a hydrothermal vent. There are other organisms, such as giant clams, feed on the bacteria. The giant red-tipped tube worms are supplied with food by bacteria living within their tissues. Meanwhile, the crabs feed on the remains of other animal inhabitants of their unusual habitat. All right, that is the end of section 4. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.